So, as I continue to talk about the IRIS program, which is the Integrated Risk Information System, which is an office within the EPA that they test the potency, carcinogenic risk, or other health risk of certain chemicals or pollutants in our air, water, land, or other offices. Their own staff, right, is within the EPA dismantling the ability of this office to actually do its job. Now, there are other offices also within the EPA that are being dismantled, but David Fatui, our deputy director of the EPA, is reported to have put out a memo which is actually challenging the validity and the, I would say, trustworthiness of the science that has basically allowed the IRIS system to help regulate our exposure as American citizens to particular chemicals in our everyday life. And it goes into the fact that these people want to allow corporations that have been following some of the IRIS, some of the regulations that have come from IRIS science determinations to basically seek alternative, I would say, reviews, and then to not use IRIS in the future. And my problem with that is that when it comes to this, in this memo that's reported to have been shared with ProPublica, he is not talking about, hey, we're going to propose this instead as the government agency that receives American tax dollars to make sure that Americans are safer. No, he's saying don't use the program that has existed since 1985, which has reasonably been allowed to actually determine how dangerous certain things can be. And he's casting doubt, and he's giving corporations a foot in the door to say, we don't trust what the government says, so we're going to go with what we believe. And we know that corporations that want to get a particular product out into the market will use whatever science helps them to make their point. We can go into the fact that I'll say, was it cigarette companies used to report that cigarettes didn't cause cancer? They said that for years. Oil and gas companies had even more advanced reporting on like climate change and the effects on their bottom line and their businesses for years before I think a majority of the scientific community even caught on, and they buried these reports. And it's if you look into history, no corporation that's worth its salt will ever sit back and make sure that it makes less money. Like their only job is to make money. But as the government, it's your job to make sure that they can make money and that the American citizens don't die in that process. Because we've seen corporations will do absolutely diabolical things to just make sure that they make a quick buck. And I'm just kind of looking up David Fatui's history, right? He was a partner of the global law firm Gibson Dunn, who played a part in challenging the EPA's ban of asbestos, right? And essentially argued that the EPA failed to demonstrate that crystal tile asbestos presents an unreasonable risk of injury. Now, we've all seen those mesothelioma commercials and how asbestos was rampant in its use throughout our society. And the man who is essentially trying to argue that this government program that is testing the dangers of certain chemicals and materials in U.S. society, he literally argued on behalf of the companies that wanted to use that because it was the cheaper, more readily available material that can get done their priorities. And when you look at the vote breakdown between the senators that voted for him, it was strictly along, I would say, party lines, right? Where it was just as many, I think all the Republican senators voted for him, and all of the Democratic senators voted against him. Now, there were some Democratic no votes, I think, or non-voting, so I have to see if they missed the vote or they didn't vote because of other political considerations. But when you look at some of the states that actually voted for this particular individual, that was literally representing the firm that would allow as much environmental damage to be absolved from the responsibility of corporations. You have places like Alaska, you have places like Alabama, right? And just considering those two places alone, the environment there is particularly diverse, is particularly sensitive to different changes, and these people make their living off of the ways in which the environment operates. And the senators there voted for him just based off a party line because he's a sharp legal mind. Now, he's Harvard educated. He led a team apparently of hundreds of lawyers. He's a smart man, but he's a smart man who is basically advocating for corporations to basically run roughshod over the American people, right? I would say also there was like a particular lawsuit that they bring up in which a man had basically found out that there was a massive amount of forever chemicals, and he represented a corporation that he got dismissed from the suit, even though the man's wife died of cancer years earlier, and he was suffering from health issues, and he represented the corporations and was just like, hey, that's not our problem. And so it's this lack of care for like the quality of life of American citizens that gets a little bit crazy, and why their challenging of the Irish program is particularly insidious, because what is the outcome that they want from this particular instance? They want corporations to be able to do what they want, and then we're going to end up like these people, like the man in Maine that was trying to sue a company that polluted his well water, and American citizens are just going to be sick, and then they're going to die, and then we don't have proper health care because we've had to water it down because we don't want to be like Europe, right? And there are problems with European healthcare, but we can form something that's even better in America, because why not? But we have representatives that work against everything, and it doesn't make sense to me, but it does make sense. And so, this is another instance in which the fox is guarding the hen house, and it doesn't make particular sense, but I guess that's our politics. But that's why, it bothers me so much about the people within the administration itself, because they are regularly advocating for ideas that are making things worse. And then when they propose changes, they do not provide alternatives to actually improve anything. They just want to eliminate the rules, which were there for a purpose. Like, if we have to remember, the EPA was not started by some Democratic president. It was started by Richard Nixon after he read Silent Spring by I think Rachel Carlson, in which it described the absolutely detrimental effects of DDT runoff into American society, in which you had entire environments shutting down and dying, like little ecosystems that actually supported quality of life and nature in particular states just dying because of the effects of the chemicals in that particular area of America. And we're trying to go back to a time in which regulations don't matter, and there's no one to say whether or not something is acceptable, which is the government's job, right? And this is what gets me, because again, right, you would think that people would consider the fact that if you have no regulations and American citizens start dying in mass, it is going to increase the cost to the American government to deal with it, right? And in the era of social media, right, that news will spread quickly. And then again, how are you going to support your government operations if everyone is too sick to work? That's the point that gets me. You need regulation with the way corporations exist, because they are always going to push to get as much as they can. And the government should always be there to be like, hey, we get you, you have to push, but this is going to kill too many people. And now the government's not doing that because they don't care. And I guess they haven't cared. That's the other thing. They don't care at all.